Discerning Hearts provides content dedicated to those on the spiritual journey. To continue production of these videos, prayers, and more, go to discerninghearts.com and click the donate link found there or inside the free Discerning Hearts app to make your donation. Thanks, and God bless.
DiscerningHearts.com presents St. John of the Cross, Master of Contemplation, with Father Donald Haggerty. Father Haggerty is a priest of the Archdiocese of New York who serves at St. Patrick's Cathedral. He taught moral theology and worked as a spiritual director in seminaries for 20 years. He has directed numerous yearly retreats for the Missionaries of Charity. He is the author of Contemplative Provocations, The Contemplative Hunger, Conversion, Contemplative Enigmas, and St. John of the Cross, Master of Contemplation, the book on which this series is based. St. John of the Cross, Master of Contemplation, with Father Donald Haggerty. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. Talk about being real. When we had just spoken about the experiences that we have in prayer, the how we desire that again, or we feel like we want more, and then we become frustrated. He addresses that area of anger, as you put it in the book, finding now a distastefulness in prayer. They quote, become peevish in the works that they do and easily angered by the least thing. And occasionally they are so unbearable that nobody can put up with them. How interesting, that type of irritability that can be a barrier to contemplation, can it?
Well, he's making, again, a great point, because what happens in the life of prayer often then overflows, more than often, it generally overflows into the time outside of prayer. So if a person is, is self-seeking in prayer and is frustrated in what they were seeking, so a consoling prayer or to feel emotional love for our Lord, I want to love you, so much, and being frustrated in that, it's more than likely they go outside of prayer then with this kind of frustrated irritability and not lashing out at other people, but in some manner, disgruntled. And so we see that law that it really is very real, that your interior life is going to overflow in its reality, into the life of action outside. So if we are selfless in prayer, leaving the self aside, we are likely to go outside of prayer and be more selfless in our generosities. But if we're focused on ourselves or what we want in prayer, then the same person will probably go outside of prayer and not be happy with the task assigned or the job that has been given, find frustrations also in that. And, it's kind of, the other side of the same coin. And, to give away oneself, that produces good fruits. To look in on oneself and be focused on what was pleasant for me, that's also going to be likely the pursuit of things outside of prayer.
Now, here's another one that sets off alarm bells, I think, for many, many folks, and myself included. I've had to really have a gut check on this one, and that's spiritual gluttony, where you just keep consuming, and never just resting with sometimes of where you're at or what God has already given you. Use what you've been given. And I think powerful remedy to that is exactly what you've always counseled us, Father Haggerty, is that just go to the scriptures, just listen to our Lord. What is he telling you there? But oftentimes for some of us, that's just not enough, and we want more and more and more.
Yeah, and it's a good example of, kind of spiritual poverty that does have to be embraced. And John of the Cross, in that, those couple of pages there, he will be commenting on, again, common human weakness, to be looking for satisfactions, whether in new prayers or new things, or, people like to have objects, that are appealing and adding to these things. And, the spiritual life is capable also of seeking to accumulate things that are satisfying, and, the effort to be simple. I think spiritual life, again, Mother Teresa's sisters have, taught me so much, but the simplicity of life is one of the signs of a serious growing spiritual life. And we complicate our lives sometimes by never being, not finding something satisfying. As an example, by the way, John of the Cross for me has been a go-to person. I have found what I was looking for in John of the Cross. So I haven't read that much of Saint Bernard, for instance, which another priest friend of mine has said he's now studying very carefully. And then I open up a couple of pages and I said, this is nothing like John of the Cross that I can see. And sometimes it's not good to try to stretch ourselves too far if we have found what we need. It's like looking for, new experiences in different ways, whether it's objects or new chapels or new places of pilgrimage, to keep a certain simplicity. If we have found God, we have found everything.
I think that can be a danger in some ways, at least from my perspective as someone of vocation in the world, that we can get so caught up in that, trying to feed that spiritual gluttony, that we are overlooking the things that are needed to be cared for right where we're at in the home. And I'm running from here to there and purchasing this and that, and I'm neglecting my family. I'm neglecting my neighbor. I might not be there for my kids in this moment because I have to do this one more thing. And it's between Jesus and me, and I've got to do all these things. And I say that in reverence, because I think the soul doesn't realize what it's doing. It could be just constantly trying to feed. And then the irony of it is they'll never be satisfied, or at least not fully. Is that a fair thing to say, Father?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good comment, Kris, on, these are comments that you're making about people who are, serious. They've caught something, they've tasted something of this desire, greater desire for God. And sometimes it's good to be conscious that, not to forget the one thing needful. And that might be, yes, God, but it's also perhaps your family. And, love begins at home. And that need for being able to identify, to see, sometimes not the exciting thing, but the faithfulness to the priorities of one's vocation and what's right there in front of us. So, yeah, the dangers, are sometimes stretching outside of what really would please God in the moment. And, and sometimes that's the unglamorous choice to what really is, but before God, the essential way to please him in that moment.
Yeah, it's something that I came to find for myself anyway, Father, that I didn't necessarily need to have to go find the newest thing or the latest experience, because the Lord had provided for me it all along, and that's in the sacraments. I can go to Mass. I'm blessed. I'm able to go to daily Mass, or I can go to confession when I'm confused and frustrated or what's going on there. It's the things that have always been there. And that right there, he's waiting to encounter us in that, first and foremost. Then if other things come forward or led somewhere else, well, then well and good. But when I feel I need that encounter with him, it's right there, isn't it?
Well, that's a great gift we have as Catholics. The Eucharist, the Rosary, this closeness with Mary, and we have such great gifts in these things. And if we take advantage of them, certainly a door is opening to God in our lives. So these are kind of obvious things, but most people don't realize that. As a priest, I admire very much people who go to daily mass. And even though that can be, it's part of the, in a sense, almost a routine, a committed, repeated thing in one's daily life, that has surely, impact on a life when people are going to daily mass and they are invited, by God to just turn their life over to Him each day in this manner. They're taking God Himself into their body and soul. These things have impact. And it's like anything in life, when you are doing something as a kind of portion of love in a serious way every day in that manner, that has effects. We don't have to seek after dramatic experiences. That steady, repeated encounter with God in mystery, that's going to have effects, over time as we go on, as we go through life.
Yeah, and I think the last two that bring up the close of this particular chapter, the barricades on the road to contemplation, that of spiritual envy and spiritual sloth. The spiritual envy, of course, is looking at others and being sad that you're not feeling what the other people are feeling or experiencing. And that envy, it's almost, you're looking through a window and you don't see the whole picture. You just don't know what that soul, the totality of what the other is experiencing. Don't ask for something you may not be able to carry. And that can be a danger, can it?
Well, surely. And, envy is, again, these capital sins are never eliminated from our life, meaning they're wounded tendencies in the human person, and they're not mortal sins. I mean, lust, if we commit sins of lust, yeah, these are mortal sins, but these are wounds of the human person even after baptism due to original sin. So yes, we can have worldly envy, but in the spiritual life, it's very possible too. Again, I think he's conscious in this section of these younger sisters getting started in the serious life of a cloistered, serious pursuit of holiness in life. So he's conscious too that some people they have their own frustrations, going through their own trials interiorly, and they see people who seem to be happy, in their who are happy, and who are exercising themselves cheerfully in communal life, and they might be actually themselves also going through interior trial and difficulties and the struggle with humility. And it can be the mistake of looking at appearances and assuming that I want to have, what she has. And, God has His own way with each person. He doesn't do the same with each person. And our own life before God has to be lived, in a authentic, gift of ourselves before God. And we have to leave, this is, if God seems to give greater gifts to another person, well, we don't know also what greater suffering He might be giving that person. So part of religious life, part of living a good spiritual life, is that great respect, for the sacredness of another soul before God. Each one has his own path to walk before God. Some will live a shorter life. Some will live into their 90s. Some will, be asked something. Some will not be asked. And it's a very individual thing with each person. So envy is kind of a mistaken, it's getting sidetracked again, because it's forgetting how individual each of us are in the gaze of God and His love for us.
Well, and spiritual sloth too. I mean, that's something that we have to be very mindful of, don't we?
Yes, he again, and his expressions in this too, to be careful not to give up, not to just get accustomed to what's easier, and not to not to give up, to not to become. He has a very great line in here. I don't have it in front of me, but in which he says, to be patient, yes, with what we're doing, but he says that sometimes people are too patient with their weakness and faults. We have to work at things too, and not just, well, God will give me the grace when he wants to give it to me. No, maybe he's giving the grace right now, and to make energetic effort to overcome fault, or to live in charity, or to exercise mental austerity. And sometimes he has a nice comment there that God would like some people to be not too patient with themselves. Let us move on sometimes. And perhaps that's a good point also, that we all need to hear at times.
That's the brilliance of St. John of the Cross, isn't it? I mean, he's taken as you said, the vices that we are aware of, and has shown us how it affects our spiritual life. And this is something that we can, again, do and examine, and then go and find if necessary, a good spiritual friend, or if you have a director or confessor, your pastor, or someone who can kind of help you work through that awareness of what's going on. It's quite a gift, isn't it?
Yeah, and certainly to have regular confession, not just for the sake of confessing our faults, failings, but to be reminded, the sacramental absolution, that prayer of absolution is a divine act upon the soul in that moment, just as the consecration of bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ is a divine act taking place. And similarly, a divine act touches the soul in a sacramental confession. And it's also good. I mean, John of the Cross is alluding to the need to be aware. It's not just the things we do in action that are holding us back, but the interior, attitudes, the interior approach in our thinking, the indulgent, turning on self that's taking place in our interior life, the motivations that might be self-interested, our own pride, our vanities, these things are not to gaze on them too long. A common thing that is said, I think it's a good statement, we shouldn't do too much of a self-examination, 5 minutes, 7 minutes a day, but also looking at those interior things that, why did I do that? What, did I have an impure motive when I was doing that I was really seeking for myself in that? And those things can surely help the spiritual life to be more aware, than to refine us, to burn away some of the self-seeking aspects of our life that largely are there because of our interior, attachments to self.
Any final thoughts on this aspect of the teachings of St. John of the Cross, Father Haggerty?
Well, my own sense of all this is not to be daunted by it. And I think, we could be older, we could be younger. And I think, delving into St. John of the Cross is a discovery in itself. And I think we all, we all love the gospel. We all are hopefully moved when we hear our Lord speak, if we're present at a Mass. And I think it's a good realization. I am a firm believer in the second conversion of life, that you can have a second threshold crossed in one's life. And John of the Cross is a great person to aid that second conversion into a deeper sense of the depths that are offered to us in relationship with God.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Father.
Thank you, Kris, for having me.
You've been listening to St. John of the Cross, Master of Contemplation, with Father Donald Haggerty. This series is based on the book St. John of the Cross, Master of Contemplation, published by Ignatius Press. Visit ignatius.com to obtain a copy, or you can find it at any fine Catholic bookstore. To hear and/or to download this conversation, along with hundreds of other spiritual formation programs, visit discerninghearts.com, or you can find it within the free Discerning Hearts app. This has been a production of Discerning Hearts. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. We hope that if this has been helpful for you, that you will first pray for our mission, which is to offer authentic and rock-solid spiritual formation freely to souls around the world. And if you feel us worthy, consider a charitable donation, which is fully tax-deductible to help support our efforts. But most of all, we hope that you will tell a friend about discerninghearts.com and join us next time for St. John of the Cross, Master of Contemplation, with Father Donald Haggerty.